Here at the Palma International Boat Show, there's a new brand called Makai. Now, Makai is a British brand. They're designed in Italy, they're built in Croatia, and here in Palma, they're exhibiting their first ever boat in the form of this rather lovely looking Makai M37. Now, as with any cat, one of the first things to consider is the beam. And this boat has a proper catamaran beam. This is 15'3" long. It's a 37-foot boat. So the beam actually accounts for about 41% of the overall length. So it's very substantial. Not quite sailing cat beam territory, but very substantial nonetheless. And you absolutely feel that when you're in here. Let's step on board at the port side. As you can see, we've got some shore power just here. Down here, this is quite interesting. This locker, if I lift that up, you'll see we've got a stern anchor on this particular boat. That's an option, of course, but it's so well engineered for beaching, this platform, that it seems like a waste not to have it. So to that end, even as standard, you get Kevlar strips on the keels on each hull. Plus, when we get to the foredeck, you'll see how well engineered that is if you enjoy running up estuaries, sticking the nose into a beach and stepping off at the bow. In the meantime, let's check out the arrangement back here. Now, the basic arrangement takes tremendous advantage of all that beam. Keeps the companionways lovely and wide. Very easy to make your way forward all the way to that step-through screen. A good bit of that beam is actually used for these sections on the side. They're particularly broad, these mouldings, but of course they're not wasted because they're used for storage all the way up and down. We'll have a look at that in a second. The star of the show back here, though, of course, is this central island sunbed, slightly elevated. If we open that up, you'll see that there's plenty of storage in there. It doesn't actually go beneath the deck, but it really doesn't need to because it goes a very long way forward. It's an absolutely cavernous space. As you can see, they've been able to fit pretty much everything they need for a show in this locker alone. We'll shut that back down. Good strong rams, actually. It doesn't take much in the way of effort at all. And at the leading edge of that sunbed, we've got reversing backrest, so you can, of course, expand the sunbed, put your feet up, face aft. It's a lovely little feature. And further forward, facing aft, we have another bench of similar size, easily big enough to seat 4 or 5 people. A central table here that looks actually like natural teak, but in fact it's Iroko, an African hardwood, much more sustainable and really high quality. This is beautifully done. Very heavyweight indeed. So you can either face 10 people forward in the shelter of this hardtop plus another 2 at the helm, or you can rig this for a proper dining party for 10 people, no problem at all. Really good feature. But before we make our way over to the starboard side, let's have a look at some of this storage over here. As I say, it's absolutely cavernous, goes a long way forward and a decent way aft. It's very deep. Good regular shape, so you can fit all sorts of baggage in there. And this is quite a nice feature too. If I pull this open, you see we've got dedicated brackets for our fenders, so they're not just rattling about and clogging up the space that you should be using for the rest of your gear. Now, if we move over to the starboard side, you see we get more of the same. This again is a very thoughtful touch. A couple of bins built in there, so you can actually recycle. Further aft, more storage, full in this case of life jackets. And here's our transom shower on the starboard side. Another similar locker to the anchor locker on the port side. Good size that as well. So you really don't struggle for space for storage on this boat at all. And further forward, the arrangement involves a transverse wet bar, a couple of helm seats, and on the other side, this is nice, a lower level, more intimate bit of companion seating. It differs markedly from the seating elsewhere on this main deck. It's a very comfortable, relaxed place just to lounge, but there are options. So if you value your cooking facilities and you want extra seats to face forward, then you could basically take this entire unit and mimic it on the port side. I suspect that'll be a very popular option actually, particularly for the charter market. But if we spin around again and look aft, you'll see that we also have options in the centre here. As I say, this is the first boat, but for the charter market again, they're talking about the option of triple benches, So seating for potentially 15 people facing forward there in the shelter of this hardtop. And there is, or at least there will be, an extendable canvas so you can shelter the people aft. So it's a very flexible kind of arrangement. And they can do all of that, of course, because this furniture is not moulded into the deck. It sits proud. It's essentially modular. So there's all sorts of stuff they can do to take advantage of this vast expanse of catamaran deck. Now let's take a little look into the port engine bay and see what we see. Now as standard, this boat comes with a Yanmar 8L V320. What we have here on the showboat is the uprated 370 horsepower version, but it uses the same block. It's a 4.5 litre V8 operating through a stern drive. But as I pointed out, surface drives are also available. Now there were engineers, people who made a living out of being down in bilges, involved in the design of this, so obviously all the servicing points are readily accessible. If I spin around and face to port, you'll see we've got the electrics lining that bulkhead. We also have a yacht sentinel unit, so you can get data on your boat remotely. If I spin around again and look forward, beyond this storage zone, you'll see that we have one of the 2 fuel tanks. Now obviously we have the same in the starboard hull. This is a custom built polyethylene tank, 450 litres, so 900 litre capacity in total. And they've used that same design for the water tank, so that's also 450 litres, and that sits across in the starboard hull, just aft of the fuel tank. You've also got the calorifier in the starboard hull, so the starboard hull is all about the fluids, and the port hull all about the electrics. What I also like down here is the detail, the fact that you're not planting your feet amongst the stringers in the bilges, because they've engineered a little flat floor that drops into the space, just to make things that little bit easier. And another thing they're considering in here is introducing a fourth bulkhead here, a baffle, just forward of the engines, so you can minimise the size of the cabinet that surrounds them, thereby minimising the reverberation and reducing the decibel readings that you get up in that saloon. Now, if we make our way forward past the helm for now and nip up these central steps, there's a really good aperture here. There's absolutely no prospect at all of banging your head. You make your way out onto the foredeck, and if you compare it to the likes of Aquila, well, it's not a lot going on up here on the face of it. What we see is a big expanse of flat deck, and that suggests to me that we're going to get loads of volume down below. And indeed, that's part of what makes this boat special. They haven't tried to please everyone in all kinds of ways. What they've done here is not create a day boat, but create a proper cruiser with proper cruising cabins. So this is an important feature of that. They have, however, introduced these right at the bow, right at the forepeak, just sunken cushions, big enough for 3 or 4 people to sit there. And here is a little sliding rail with a ladder set in down below. So if you do choose to take advantage of this boat's ability as an estuary runabout, you fancy beaching it, then you can step off at the bow, absolutely no problem at all. Deploy that stern anchor, all the while perfectly confident that those Kevlar strips are taking care of your fiberglass. The anchor locker is, of course, down there beneath that cushion in the centre, and we have additional lockers nice and deep on either side for storage of lines and fenders should you require it. But let's make our way back inside and check out what that foredeck does for the accommodation down below. Now we'll go into the starboard hull first, spin around and face forward, and this is what we get. Now first and foremost, it's a very pleasant environment to be in. If I spin the camera around, you'll see that headroom is really good. It's got to be 6'6" at least. The fabrics and furnishings are all very attractive as well. This is the standard fit out. You get kind of pale Nordic style oaks. Lots of recessed lighting, LEDs in the deckhead there. A really big, deep window in 2 parts. It's a really attractive place to be, I've got to say. Good size of double bed there, significantly raised. So if we bend down again, we're going to get plenty of storage in here. Lined with carpet in this case, which eradicates a bit of condensation, keeps your stuff where you want it. Things feel nicely built too. It might be their first boat, but as boat number ones go, it really does feel like a very accomplished piece of work. Further forward, a bit of extra storage under there again. And then at the head end of the double bed, a little changing seat. There's storage under there again, storage in there, some charging points here. And that doubles essentially as a step to get up to this, which is another charming little feature. a single bed tucked away up there. Big enough for a 6-footer to sleep in. There's decent natural light from up above. And the bed head for that double bed actually acts as a little barrier to keep you snug and in position if you happen to be in a slightly lively anchorage where you're sleeping. It's a really attractive feature. The other thing I really like in this forward part of the boat is the fact that all this bedroom furniture in this starboard cabin and all the furniture in the port cabin, it's all linked as part of one continuous single moulding. And that, of course, radically uprates rigidity and helps reduce rattles to an absolute minimum. Now, if I spin around, you'll see that we also have an ensuite here. And again, we step down in there. Headroom is even greater in here, I'd say 6'8" perhaps. Again, a decent size of window, a good mirror on that aft bulkhead to bounce the light around. Some decent storage, a low-level sink. It's a good size, that, and a separate shower. Now, there's not quite room for the toilet out here. The toilet's got to go in there, but that's not a problem at all. It's actually quite a handy feature if you like to sit down in the shower, which I certainly do. Now, let's make our way out of the starboard hull, up into the central companionway and down to the port side, because the port cabin is particularly interesting. And when you step down in here, it doesn't feel like the same kind of cabin as the starboard side at all, but believe it or not, it occupies exactly the same parameters. It's just used very differently because it's designed to be the owner's cabin. Now, as you can see, hanging storage here, lots of extra storage forward. And the bed itself runs transverse, which is great. It's elevated to window level, so when you wake up, you're looking directly out at the views instead of at your feet, which is fantastic. If I climb onto the bed and move forward, there's plenty of shelving built into this forward bulkhead. There's a neat little grippy panel inserted into this timber there on the lid, so your stuff stays put. And if I open that up, there's another huge space. There's an open shelf there for books and so on, and down below we have another compartmentalised space for your bits and bobs, your iPad, your iPhone, and charging points to enable you to plug them in overnight. Again, we've got a nice soft fabric bed head there, and if I sit myself round and take a look at the view, that's what you're going to wake up to. Shift that boat and it'd be pretty special. And in terms of headroom, well, that is again fantastic. I'm perched up here, loads of space to read, more than you need, even if you're sitting bolt upright. It's a big bed too, very comfortable indeed. And if I move around the corner and look aft, well, you'll see that of course we have an ensuite, and that, as you'd expect, exactly mirrors the ensuite we saw on the starboard side. That is no bad thing at all. We're out on the water now. Things are getting a little bit dark, so visibility is not great, and our windscreen wipers are not working because on the trip across from Split to Palma, the fuse gave out. So as I say, visibility is a bit limited, but we've got lots of eyes on board. We've got about 8-9 people, so plenty of lookouts. It's slightly raised. That's in order to give you better visibility through this big wraparound screen. We do have big old mouldings on the side here, so it's not really a place to stand and helm, but we have individual bolsters here, a pair of seats, and in the bolster position, sort of propping yourself up. It's very comfortable indeed. Everything falls beautifully to hand. Given this is boat number one, actually, I have to say the ergonomics are really good. Now, we've got a couple of chart plotters here. They are 12 inches. You've got space for a little bit more than that, plus the engine displays on either side. Here's our joystick up on the starboard ledge, perfectly positioned for our right hand. And the twin throttles right here, of course. There's a couple of things to alter. As you'd expect of boat number one, our ceiling panel fell down in the rough, so that needs fitting back on. Here we have a window that basically opens the wrong way, so that the aperture's forward. You want the aperture here so you can actually reach out and operate the dedicated cleat that sits just outboard of us here on those mouldings. Make things a little simpler from a seamanship perspective. Now, as I say, on this boat we've got the top rated engine option. The Yanmar 8 LV 370s. The standard fit out is for 320s, operating through stern drives, and these are in fact operating through stern drives, which is interesting because they reckon about 50% of their customers will actually go for surface drives, partly because of the reliability, the low maintenance, and partly because of the extra efficiency when you actually get her up onto the plane. Let's do that right now. As you can see, we've got some big rollers piling through here. So what we'll do is turn her slightly to starboard and run along the seas a bit until we get used to her. Now you'll see that the decibel readings here, you can probably register that yourselves. Pushing on upwards towards 85, 86, 90 decibels. So on a long cruise that could be potentially tiring, I think. They're looking at changing that, looking at improving the soundproofing. But of course this big old structure around here, that naturally traps the sound. Even so, right from the off, you can tell the ride is soft, and in spite of these relatively big seas, we're doing 24 knots here, we're feeling no impacts, and what impacts we do feel are relatively gentle. We'll turn into the head sea and run back along the trough. Keep us slightly on the plane. There we are. It's not difficult to achieve. And as we do so, we should have a little talk about the efficiency. Now, we've got a pair of 450 litre tanks here, so that totals 900 litres. With 20% redundancy left in the system, we're looking at 720 litres. Now, when we're cruising along at anything between 20 and 30 knots in these seas, we're seeing between 4.5 and 5 litres per nautical mile. So we've got a range of around about 150, 160 miles. That's not huge for a cat, of course, but this is a relatively quick and sporting cat. If you want to really eke out your range, then you can, of course, take some of that way off. We reduce it right down to 6 to 7 knots. Well, at that speed, we're drinking just 2 litres per nautical mile. So you're pushing the range right out to 300, 350 miles, which gives you all kinds of extra flexibility in terms of the kind of nav plan you could undertake. Now, as I say, this is boat number 1, and even though they brought it across from Croatia to Palma, which is quite some passage, let me tell you, they're still experimenting with the props, still experimenting, trying to get the best out of this boat. They anticipate that once it's running at optimum sort of pace, they'll be able to get 33 knots out of it with these 370s and stern drives, or else around about 35 knots with the extra efficiency of those surface drives. For now, they reckon the props they got on here, 24 inches, are a little bit small. They're going to upsize them a little. So I look forward to seeing what kind of pace we get in the long run. In the meantime, it's perfectly safe to say that in spite of all that lovely volume forward for those 2 cabins, this is a proper driver's cab. Well, there you have it. That's the new Makai 37, their first boat. And as first boats go, I think that's a really, really good effort. Of course, there are elements to tidy up, a few bits to tighten up, but already you can see it's a beautiful looking boat. It's good to drive. It's very well built for the most part. It's also got some excellent cabins, and there's lots of flexibility dialed into that deck layout. Now, as I say, execution is not yet perfect, but it's already very clear to me that the thought processes going on at Makai Yachts are absolutely bang on. So I have no hesitation at all in saying that this boat, and in fact this brand, is one that we really need to keep a very close eye on.